These are some of the questions you could get asked on your JavaScript interview. Let's get right into it. Hey guys, welcome to Tech Ginger, and today we are going to be looking at JavaScript interview questions. So I'm going to be doing this in a series or in parts, and this is the first part. So I'm going to be talking about the very beginner JavaScript interview question types, and then we are going to move to advanced concepts. So let's get started and look at the first question. So the first question is, what is a scope and scope chain in JavaScript? Let's first of all take a look at what a scope is. So a scope in JavaScript refers to the region or context of the code where a variable is declared and can be accessed. It determines the visibility and lifetime of a variable. So JavaScript has two types of scope. We have the global scope and we have the local scope or block scope. Let's take a look at some code. Over here, I have a global variable defined and a local variable defined in a function. So what this means is that this variable can be accessed anywhere in your code. A global variable can be accessed anywhere in your code, whilst a local variable can only be accessed where it is defined or the block in which it is defined. Now, let's take a look at how this works. If I run this code, first of all, I'm going to comment out this, and if I run this code, we are going to get I am global. That is because this variable can be accessed anywhere in the code. Now, if I try to run the example scope function, then we are going to get I am global and I am local. That is because I've been able to access the global variable and the local variable. Now, the thing about global variables is that they can be accessed anywhere. So if I write console.log global variable and I run this, then you realize that the global variable can be accessed inside this function. But with local variables, they cannot be called outside the block in which they are defined. So if I comment this out and I run this, then we are going to get an error. That is because this variable local var cannot be accessed in the global scope. So to just reiterate the point, we have a local scope and we have a global scope. So the second part of the question is, what is a scope chain in JavaScript? Let's take a look at its definition. So the scope chain refers to the hierarchy of the scopes in a JavaScript program. When a variable is accessed, JavaScript looks for it in the current scope, and if it's not found, it continues to the outer or enclosing scope until it reaches the global scope. This chain of nested scopes is known as the scope chain. I hope that makes sense. So let's take a look at an example. Over here, we have a variable declared in the global scope, and we have two functions, an outer function and an inner function. So we are going to console log the inner var, we are going to console log the outer var, and we are going to console log the global var. Now what you realize is that if I run this program, then we are going to get I am inner, I am outer, and I am global. So what happens? Over here, we console log inner var. JavaScript looks inside this function. Is there any variable declared inner var? Okay, we have an inner var variable over here. So it prints out I am inner. Now if you console log outer var, it looks inside this scope. Is there any variable named outer var over here? Well, I didn't find any variable over here. So I'm going to look at the outer function. I'm going to look at the immediate outer enclosing scope, which is the outer function. So it finds outer var over here and it console logs out that. Now the third console.log is global var. It looks into this function first, inside the scope, it doesn't find it. It looks inside the outer function scope, it doesn't find it. It looks inside the global scope and it finds I am global over here. So it logs that out. So that is scope chaining in JavaScript. It looks inside the immediate scope. If it doesn't find the variable, it looks inside the enclosing scope until it gets to the global scope. So that is scope chaining for you in JavaScript. Now let's look at the second question. So the second question is, what is hoisting in JavaScript and how does it affect functions and variables? So let's take a look at the definition of hoisting. Hoisting in JavaScript is a behavior where variable and function declarations are moved to the top of their containing scope during the compilation phase before the code is executed. This allows you to use the variables and functions before they are declared in your code. So let's take a look at an example. Over here, I have a variable x which is equal to 5, and I call the variable over here. Now if I run this, you are going to get an output of undefined. What is happening over here? JavaScript essentially does this. It creates the variable x and then assigns it to undefined. So if you call x, you are going to get undefined before in the next step it assigns 5 to x. So this is what happens in the background. This is what JavaScript does. So JavaScript has essentially hoisted the x variable to the top and assigned undefined to it. It doesn't actually assign 5 to it until the line 4 of the code. So this is how JavaScript handles hoisting. Now let's look at how JavaScript handles function hoisting. Over here we have a function foo which says hello, I am a function. Now we are going to call the function foo before actually declaring it, and if we run this, you realize that it works perfectly. And the reason for this is that JavaScript has hoisted the function foo. That means it moves the whole function to the top of the scope. Therefore, if you call it, it is able to access the full function. So this is how JavaScript handles function hoisting. But the thing is that this doesn't always work for every function. So let's say I have const bar which is equal to, let me just copy this and say I am a function but an arrow function. Now if I should call bar at the top over here, then this is going to throw an error. Let's take a look at that. The reason it is throwing an error is because JavaScript doesn't hoist functions declared in the arrow function style or functions declared with the const or let keyword. So take a note of that. Hoisting doesn't happen for arrow functions. It only happens to functions that have been declared with the function keyword. So that is hoisting for you. Okay guys, moving on to the third question, we want to tell the difference between the var, the let, and the const keywords. So let's look at the definition for var. Var is function scoped and is hoisted to the top of its function block. It can be reassigned and redeclared within its scope. So let's look at an example. Over here we have a function and we have a variable x which value is 10, and we have redefined x to 20, assigned a new value to it essentially. So we have two console logs, one inside the if block and one inside the function. So if I run this, we are going to get 20. So now let's look at the definition for let and let's compare it to var. So let is block scoped and is not hoisted to the entire block. It can be reassigned within its scope but not redeclared in the same scope. So for the meantime, I'm going to comment this out and I'm going to run the let example. So if I run this, you realize that we get 40 and 30. So why is this happening? The initial value for y is 30 and we reassigned y to 40 inside this block, inside this if block, right? And if I console log y out inside the outer block, we get 30. Why is that? This is because inside this block, the value for y is 40. And inside the function block, the value for y is 30. So this is why the definition said let is block scoped and not hoisted to the entire block. It can be reassigned within its scope, but not redeclared in the same scope. You understand that, right? Let is block scoped. So the value y is accessible inside only this block, inside this if block. It's not accessible inside this function block. So that is why over here we get y being 40 and outside we get y being 30. I hope that makes sense. So I'm now going to talk about const. So let's look at that. So let's look at the last keyword, which is the const keyword. Const is block scoped like let, but it cannot be reassigned after declaration. However, the values of the variables declared with const can be mutated if they are objects or arrays. So let's take a look at an example. Over here we have a function example const, and inside we have a const variable which is assigned to 50. Now we cannot reassign z to 60 because it is a const variable. So if I should run this, we are going to get an error, right? That is because z is a const and it cannot be reassigned. So I'm going to comment this out and let's look at the rest of the code. So you have an object over here which has a value of 70. Now with objects which are declared with const, you can actually reassign the values in them. So we can access this object property and then reassign it to 80. And if I console log that out, it is going to output 80. So let's take a look at that. So that ran perfectly and we have the result 80 over here. So as I said, if you have used const to declare an object on array, then you can change the values of the variables inside that object or array. So that is it for const. So that will be it for today. I realized the videos were getting long and I want the videos to be short. I was planning on talking on the spread and the rest operator, the this keyword and other concepts in JavaScript, but then as I said, the time is getting too long. So I'm going to push that to the next part of my videos. So if you liked this video, kindly hit the subscribe button, like, comment, tell me what you want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video.